They said the master's daughter wasn't quite right in the mind, that she smiled at things nobody else could see and cried when the wind shifted. After her mother died, the house sank into silence, too deep and heavy, until the day the master walked down to the slave quarters with the little girl by the hand. He said he couldn't raise her alone, that the women there knew how to care for broken things, and so he left her with them. His own child, barefoot, trembling, staring at faces that had buried too many of their own. But what no one realized was that the girl had already learned how love worked in that house, and what she became among them changed everything. The house was quiet the week the mistress died. No crying, no prayers, only the wind brushing through long hallways and rustling curtains left untouched. The master ordered the mirrors covered, the clock stopped, as if time itself had paused alongside her. They buried her on the hill behind the house, where magnolia trees leaned like tired old women over the graves. The slaves weren't allowed near. They stood at the edge of the field, heads bowed, watching the little girl, Lila, clutch her father's coat as the coffin was lowered. She was only 8, small for her age, her words soft and humming with a gentle lisp. She didn't cry. She only watched, her eyes vacant. Maybe not understanding death, or maybe understanding too much and not knowing how to say it. After the funeral, the master shut himself in his study. 3 days passed without food, whiskey, or company. When he emerged, he looked thinner, unshaven, sunken-eyed. He didn't call for his daughter. He didn't even look at her. The housekeeper, a tall woman named Essie, whispered that Lila wandered the halls at night, carrying her mother's comb and singing softly to herself. "She keeps looking for the missus," Essie said, speaking to her reflection as if it still held the woman she lost. Lila's presence unsettled the house staff. She would sit in corners for hours, tearing at her dress, murmuring in a language no one understood. Sometimes she laughed suddenly. Other times she screamed when touched, as if burned. The master either didn't notice or refused to. His grief hardened into resentment. Seeing her, so much like her mother, was more than he could bear. One evening after supper, he called 2 men and told them to bring the women from the quarters. By sunrise the next morning, the slaves saw him coming down the hill. His daughter walked barefoot beside him, clutching a doll with one arm missing, her face a mixture of fear and curiosity. The men followed silently. At the quarters he announced she would stay there, that she needed proper company while he focused on work. No one spoke. The women stared at the small figure in the dirt, her hair tangled, lips trembling. He turned and walked away, leaving her there, his only child, among those who had buried their own by his hand. The first night brought no sleep. The girl sat on a stool by the fire, her bare feet tucked beneath her dress, watching the flames as if they could speak. The women whispered among themselves, unsure how to care for a child they'd been ordered to keep. Old Mabel, the midwife, bent over from years of labor, knelt and offered a small wooden cup of milk. "Here now, baby," she said softly. "Drink this. You'll sleep easy." Lila didn't move at first, eyes fixed on the fire. Then she whispered, "Papa says fire eats people when they lie." Mabel froze. The women exchanged worried looks. "No, child," Mabel said carefully, forcing a smile. "Fire just keeps folks warm, that's all." Lila lifted the cup and drank, never taking her eyes from the flames. Later, when the women thought she slept, they spoke quietly among themselves. "Why'd he bring her here?" one asked. "She got a bed in the house." "She don't fit nowhere," Mabel muttered. "Too much like her mama, but not enough to be kept." Essie's niece, Ruth, whispered, "Looks simple to me." Mabel shot her a look. "Don't you call no child simple. God makes all his creatures the way he sees fit. Ain't her fault she born to the wrong people." In the corner, Lila stirred, her doll falling face down. She hummed a soft off-key tune, fragile but tender. The room fell silent. Even the crickets outside paused. When she finished, she smiled faintly. Mama used to sing that when Papa got mad. That night, Ruth awoke to find Lila beside her bed, holding the doll. "Papa said bad girls get sent here," she murmured. "He said you know how to fix them." Ruth could only stare. Lila leaned close. "Can you fix me?" she asked, then curled up on the dirt floor, doll pressed to her chest. By morning, everyone in the quarters understood. The child wasn't evil, but she carried something broken within her, something learned before she could speak. In the following weeks, Lila settled into the rhythm of the quarters. She fetched water, peeled potatoes, fed infants, mostly silent but always watching. She hummed while Ruth scrubbed clothes, and sometimes Ruth found herself humming back without realizing. The child fascinated and unsettled them. When the overseer walked by, Lila stiffened, eyes dull, head bowed instinctively. Once, she muttered under her breath when he shouted at a man. Mabel froze. "What you say, child?" "Papa says you beat them till they listen," Lila replied. Mabel's stomach turned. "Don't talk like that. Ain't right." Lila tilted her head. "Papa says it's right if it makes them quiet." Small habits emerged. She snapped at younger children, told them to hurry, mimicking her father's voice. The women didn't scold her, understanding she meant no harm. Yet every gesture, every word carried echoes of cruelty softened only by her innocence. Some mornings broke their hearts. Ruth found her whispering to her doll, "Don't cry, Mama. Papa said don't cry." The women grew protective, teaching her, nurturing her, brushing her hair, letting her nap by the babies. They didn't pity her. They recognized something familiar in her curiosity and confusion. Mabel called her Little Missy. Even Ruth, who had feared her, smiled when Lila tugged her sleeve or offered a wildflower. "She ain't at fault for coming from him," Ruth said once. "Born into the wrong story." Yet Lila's behavior remained strange. She laughed at pain, even her own. When she scraped her knees, she marveled at the red blood, saying, "It's red like Mama's dress." When the overseer's whip cracked, she whispered, "Papa says that means everyone's being good again." Mabel tried to teach her differently, but Lila seemed to understand only the rules of her father. One rainy night, Lila sat by the window drawing a house with no doors. "Why no doors?" Mabel asked. "So Papa can't find me," the girl replied. The master returned for her one morning, boots sinking into the wet earth, demanding she be cleaned and returned to the house. Lila ran to him, barefoot and muddy. He didn't smile, only said, "Mind what they tell you," and left. She looked at Mabel. Papa talks to God like that too. The days stretched heavy. Lila moved through chores like a shadow, mimicking the women, copying actions, but also remembering her father's words. Sometimes she stood in the doorway, repeating phrases no child should know. Mabel whispered, "She's full of echoes." She began correcting other children with her father's commands. Ruth stopped her once. Lila froze, confused, then cried, not from fear, but from the weight of someone learning wrong lessons too young. Mabel comforted her. "You ain't bad. You just don't know different yet." Over time, Lila gave orders, arranged tools, repeated her father's phrases. "Do it proper. Don't talk back. You're mine when I say you're mine." She learned power before love. By midsummer, she had become a fixture in the quarters, shadowing every task, echoing every word. Storms came, and Lila sat by the door, murmuring to Mama, her doll. Even after the storm passed, the child whispered, "Bad ones get fixed." Mabel watched, heart heavy. "She's learning what she's seen," she said. "Problem is, she's seen too much." When the master returned, he saw Lila arranging sticks like tiny graves. "What's she doing?" he asked. Mabel said she was just playing. Lila smiled faintly. "This one's for good ones when they stop crying," she said. The master's face tightened. "Who taught her that?" he demanded. Mabel shook her head. "Nobody." He ordered her back to the house, leaving the quarters in silence. Lila looked at Ruth. "Did I make him mad again?" "No, baby," Ruth said. "You didn't do nothing wrong." "Yes, I did," Lila whispered, pressing her hands together. "Papa says bad ones make him tired. I make him tired. Maybe if I stop talking he won't see me." She hummed her mother's song by the doorway, soft, cracked, impossible to name. And Mabel thought, Lord help her. Dew glistened on the grass. When she saw the horse, she gave a faint smile. "Papa," she said, as if she had been waiting for him all along. He dismounted slowly. "Come here, girl." She hesitated, glancing at Mabel. The old woman gave a small nod, her throat too tight to speak. Lila rose, brushing dirt from her dress, and walked barefoot toward him. When he reached down to lift her onto the horse, she flinched slightly. His hand froze in midair. His expression darkened, shame twisting into something harsher. "Don't act scared," he said. "Ain't no reason to be." He lifted her and swung into the saddle behind her. The women watched in silence as they rode up the hill, the child pressed against his coat, her face turned to the wind. That night, the house glowed again for the first time in months. Candles flickered behind the tall windows, and faint music drifted through the trees. The old piano played off-key, desperate to fill the silence she had left behind. From the quarters, the women listened. Mabel murmured a prayer. Ruth said nothing. She just stared at the lights and whispered, "He took her back to kill what's left of her." Inside, the girl sat at the dining table, hands folded neatly, like her mother's had been. The master poured whiskey after whiskey, his jaw tight. "You've lived like them long enough," he said finally. "You'll eat properly now. Speak properly. No more foolishness." She nodded, eyes downcast. "Yes, sir." But her voice shifted, low and cold, copying him, the same tone he used when giving orders. He froze, glass halfway to his lips. "What did you say?" he asked. She blinked. "I said yes, sir." But it wasn't confusion. She was repeating his words exactly as he had given them to others. For the first time he saw himself sitting there, not in a mirror, but in the small, broken body of a girl acting out the world he had built. He turned away, hand shaking, refilling his glass. "Go to bed," he muttered. "You talk too much." She rose quietly, but before leaving, whispered, "Papa talks too much, too." The sound of her small feet faded, leaving him alone with the echo. Days after Lila's return, the house began to breathe again, but differently. Its rhythm felt strange, uneasy, as if the walls knew something had gone wrong. The servants spoke in whispers. The master moved through rooms like a ghost, too proud to admit he had already died inside. Lila followed him everywhere. She sat on the floor beside his chair when he read, repeated his words quietly, copied his gestures, the way he crossed his legs, rubbed his thumb on the rim of his glass before drinking. Sometimes she even sat at his desk, arranging papers, pretending to sign her name like he did, though she could write nothing. At first he found it harmless. He even laughed once, a hollow sound that startled the housekeeper. "She's learning," he said, "taken after her daddy." But that laughter didn't last. One evening at supper she sat across from him, hands folded, waiting for him to begin. When he blessed the food, she bowed her head. But when he finished, she stayed bowed, lips moving silently. "What are you muttering, girl?" he asked. She looked up, calm. "I said what you said to Mama before she died." The words hit him like a slap. He stared at her, pale and still. "And what was that?" She hesitated, tilting her head. "You made me love you wrong." The fork slipped from his hand. "Who told you that?" he barked. "Mama did," she answered. But her mouth didn't move. He slammed his glass down. "Enough! You hear me? Enough of this nonsense." She flinched, shrinking back. But something had shifted inside him. He saw her not as his child, but as living proof of his shame, his wife's eyes, and his own cruelty staring back from that small, trembling body. The next morning he made her stand before the mirror in her mother's room. "Look at yourself," he said. "You ain't one of them. You're mine. Remember that." She nodded faintly, staring at her reflection as if she didn't recognize the girl looking back. Then she whispered, "She looks like you when you get mad." He raised his hand but stopped. The room went still. For the first time he realized he wasn't looking at his daughter. He was staring at the mirror image of the man he had taught her to be. He turned away, voice shaking. "Go on," he said. "Get out of my sight." She left, pressing her small hand to the mirror, leaving a print in the dust that looked like his. After that morning, the house seemed to fold in on itself. The child, once humming through the halls, now moved without sound. Her small feet left no mark. She no longer asked questions or said her father's name. She became like the dust clinging to the curtains, unseen, waiting for a breeze that never came. At first, he told himself this was good. Obedience meant peace. Silence meant healing. But the quiet carried weight. He would wake at night to find her standing in the doorway, watching him sleep, head tilted, expression unreadable. "What are you doing there, girl?" he'd bark. Her voice came soft, almost gentle. He said nothing, but his dreams grew worse. Each morning she sat at the kitchen table, staring into her milk. When asked what she whispered, she said, saying sorry, 'cause Papa forgot how. He kept her busy with chores, folding linens, polishing piano keys her mother once played. But even then, she haunted him. Once he caught her arranging silver spoons, murmuring, "Mama says folks shouldn't die alone." He snatched them away. "Don't talk about your mother." She didn't flinch. "Then what should I talk about?" The housekeeper, Essie, tried to help. She brought food, little kindnesses, songs from her own childhood. But Lila ate little. "Mama's singing now. She don't need me," she said. The master's guilt turned sour. He began seeing pity as defiance, grief as insolence. Each glance reminded him of what he could not control. One afternoon, seeing her staring into the parlor mirror again, he snapped, "You think she's in there? Watching?" Lila blinked. "She ain't watching." He shook her by the shoulders. "Stop talking like her. Stop talking like that." "I'm trying, Papa, but your voice don't leave," she whispered. He let go. She stumbled, hitting the piano, a faint broken note lingering in the air. "Go upstairs," he said hoarsely, "before I forget you're my blood." She obeyed quietly. Later that night the piano lid was open. A line of dust marked the keys, broken only by one small handprint. Carved faintly in the wood were the words, "I'm still listening." Rumors spread slowly through the quarters. The lights burned late, later than ever. Sometimes after midnight, the wind carried sounds not belonging to the living, the crack of a belt, a slammed door, a man's voice breaking, and a child's hum, soft and unbroken. Mabel was the first to hear it clearly. One night, she stepped outside to pour out washwater. Upstairs, a candle still glowed. She could hear a rhythm striking wood repeatedly. "Lord, don't let that be her," she whispered. By morning, Lila had bruises on her arms. The housekeeper said she fell. Nobody believed it. When field hands delivered corn, Ruth glimpsed Lila through the kitchen window. She sat folding napkins, precise, quiet, her lips split, her eyes blank. That night, Mabel gathered the others. "She's dying slow up there. No one's coming to save her." Ruth shook. "What can we do?" "Go near that house. You don't come back," someone warned. "Maybe," Mabel said. "But I can't sit here watching that child forget how to be human." The next night, barefoot, Mabel and Ruth crept to the house. The smell of whiskey floated from the parlor. Inside, the master slumped, shirt undone, bottle in hand. Lila knelt beside him, picking up glass shards. He watched her like a reflection, disgusted but unable to look away. "You're pretending you don't understand me," he slurred. She didn't answer. He leaned forward, voice sharp. "You hear me?" Finally, she looked up. "I hear you always," she said softly, "even when you ain't talking." Something in that broke him. He slammed the bottle against the wall. "You ain't her," he shouted. "You'll never be her." Lila whispered, "I know." The pistol trembled in his hand. Trees loomed overhead as they trudged back toward the cabins. Mud clung to their feet, heavy and icy. When they reached the quarters, no one spoke. The others stood at the doorways, pale faces illuminated by lamplight, watching as Mabel wrapped the girl in a blanket and set her near the fire. Lila didn't cry. She just stared into the flames, her eyes catching the light. "Can I stay here now?" she asked. Mabel brushed damp hair from her forehead. "You can stay as long as you need, baby." The girl nodded slowly. "He said I belong to him." Mabel's voice trembled. "You don't belong to nobody no more." Later that night, when the others had fallen into uneasy sleep, Ruth found Mabel outside, staring at the hill. The house stood far off, a faint light flickering in an upstairs window. "You think he'll come after her?" Ruth asked. Mabel shook her head. "No, he's seen himself. That's worse than death for a man like him." The next day, no one saw the master in the fields. By morning, smoke stopped rising from his chimney. Some said he'd locked himself in the study. Others whispered he went down to the river where his wife was buried and never returned. Lila stayed silent for days, sleeping by the fire with her one-armed doll pressed to her chest. When she spoke, it was only to say, "Papa's house don't sound no more." No one corrected her. The house on the hill had fallen silent, and silence was all it offered. Summer turned to autumn, and the Brantham plantation rotted from the inside. The cotton still grew, the river still ran, crows still circled, but the life had drained away, like blood soaking into dirt. The big house no longer gave orders. The master's shutters remained closed. No lamps burned past dusk. At first, the overseer tried to keep the work moving, barking at the men, demanding quotas, pretending nothing had changed. But the slaves knew the truth. The master's silence hollowed the land. There was no command, no direction, only echoes. At the center of those echoes was Lila. She lived among them, sharing meals, sleeping on the floor beside Mabel's cot, speaking only when spoken to. The women treated her gently, like a child left too long in the cold. Ruth sewed her a new dress from scraps of muslin, white and plain. "You look like an angel now," Ruth said, trying to smile. Mabel's reply was quiet. "Angels ain't born from pain, child. They just visit it." At night, Lila hummed to herself, soft and tuneless. Sometimes she whispered to her doll, words changed. "Don't cry, Mama," she murmured. "He can't reach no more." One evening, under a full moon, Mabel heard her speaking to someone unseen. The sound came from the magnolia tree behind the cabins. Mabel followed her through the dark, finding Lila kneeling in the mud, hands pressed to the roots. "What you doing out here, baby?" Mabel asked. "I'm listening," Lila said. "Listening to what?" Mabel pressed. "To him," she said. "He don't shout no more. He talks quiet now." Mabel's heart seized. "Ain't nothing up there, child. No one left to talk." But Lila smiled faintly. "Then who say my name when I sleep?" Mabel led her back inside, refusing to answer. She told herself it was just a dream the child couldn't shake. But later, when the fire burned low, she heard the hum again, slow and dragging. Beneath it, so faint it could have been wind, a man's whisper followed each note. The next morning, the air over the hill seemed strange. No smoke, no movement. Just a white mist clinging to the house, thick and still. Lila stood at the quarters doorway, staring up. "He ain't gone," she said softly. Weeks passed, and the plantation felt heavier. It wasn't just the heat or stillness. It was something else, settling into the skin, filling the lungs. The others avoided the hill, saying the house watched them, shutters creaking though no wind blew. But Lila went often, barefoot, her white dress brushing the weeds, doll held tight. She returned silent, listening to things no one else could hear. Ruth tried to stop her once. "Don't go up there, baby. Ain't nothing waiting but pain." Lila smiled faintly. "It don't hurt no more. It just remembers." That night, Ruth told Mabel, "She's changing, like she's half here, half something else." Mabel shook her head. "She ain't turning into no spirit. She's full of what he left behind. That kind of poison don't fade fast." Even Mabel couldn't shake the unease. The next morning she found Lila by the creek, arranging stones into a perfect circle. Water shimmered in the sunlight, and the girl dipped her fingers into it, tracing ripples until they vanished. "What you making, honey?" Mabel asked. "A place for him to rest," Lila said. Mabel's heart sank. "You mean your daddy?" The girl nodded. "He talked in my sleep. Said he can't find the door, so I'm making one." Mabel crouched beside her. "You don't owe him nothing, child. You hear me? No need to open a door for the man who closed every one you had." Lila's eyes met hers, calm, distant, far too old for her face. "Maybe he ain't the only one who needs rest." That evening, as the sun set, the women saw her standing at the field's edge, facing the big house. Hair moved in the breeze, figure small against the dying light. "Lila," Ruth called, "come back now." She raised her hand slowly as if waving to someone unseen, then whispered, "Papa says it's time to be quiet again." Her eyes were emptier, softer, as if something settled behind them. Mabel's hands trembled. She drew the child close, whispering a prayer she couldn't finish, knowing the man's body was gone. But his voice spoke through her. Winter came thin and gray, fields bare, river low, frost across the plantation. Most nights, the quarters slept early to keep warm. Sometimes, when the wind came down from the hill, they heard something that kept them awake, humming. Not an animal, not the creak of trees. A low, steady hum drifting across empty fields. Ruth said it was the wind. Mabel knew better. One night she found Lila outside, facing the big house, breath rising in the cold. "What you doing, baby?" Mabel asked. "He says it's lonely up there, the quiet too heavy." Mabel's heart thudded. "Ain't nobody up there, Lila." The next morning, strange things happened in the quarters. Tools rearranged, laundry pulled from lines, water buckets knocked over. Men blamed rats or wind. Mabel noticed the pattern, everything disturbed like the master used to inspect. Lila only said, "He don't like mess." The others kept distance, fear creeping into their care. She stood too still now, looking through people, voice carrying command. One evening Ruth found her in the yard talking to no one. "Who you talking to, baby?" Lila didn't answer at first. Then, "I told him to stay quiet. He listens sometimes." Ruth swallowed. "He's gone, Lila. Gone for good." The girl smiled faintly. "Then why do you whisper his name when scared?" The air chilled that night. Ruth told Mabel, "She carries something that ain't hers." Mabel said quietly, "Ain't her fault. She just the echo." From that day, Lila stopped answering to her name. When Mabel called, she'd look up, tilt her head, and say, "That's what she used to call me." "Who, baby?" "Mama," Lila whispered. Then back to humming, calm, rhythmic, the way the master spoke before breaking someone. Frost melted. Mabel knew she couldn't wait. Whatever settled inside her was spreading quietly, steadily, like water under a door. The others avoided her gaze, even children avoided her shadow. Lila moved like smoke, restless and quiet. One morning, Mabel found her by the fire staring into the flames. "You eat yet?" No answer. Lips moved silently. "Baby, talk to me," Mabel urged. Lila blinked slowly. "He don't like me talking too loud." Mabel's breath caught. "Ain't no one here to tell you what to do. He's still here." "Where?" "Everywhere." That word chilled Mabel more than any winter wind. That evening she went to Ruth's cabin. "We take her to the river, tonight." Ruth froze. "The same river her mama's buried by?" Mabel nodded. "She needs to see where love stopped and sorrow started. Maybe then she'll let go of what ain't hers." They wrapped Lila in a shawl and walked through dark fields. Moon hung low, half hidden by clouds. Cypress and silt scented the air. At the river, Lila stopped. "This where Mama sleep," she whispered. Mabel nodded. Lila crouched, tracing circles in wet earth. "Papa cried when they put her here." "That ain't crying, baby," Mabel said. "That's guilt." Lila paused, whispering, "He still want me to say sorry." Mabel took her hands. "You don't owe that man nothing. He should be sorry to you." The girl looked up, calm. "If I don't say it, he don't sleep. Then let him walk those halls forever. That's his burden, not yours." A faint piano note floated on the wind. Lila rose. "He say he's sorry." Mabel's voice cracked. "He ain't got the right." She stepped closer to the water, pressing palms flat. Ripples spread, glowing faintly, surface turning white as milk. Mabel whispered, "Come back now. Water's too cold." But Lila knelt, hands on water, white sheen climbing her arms. "He say he tired. He can't rest till I forgive him." Mabel's heart thudded. "You don't owe him that. He don't deserve peace." "Maybe I do," Lila whispered. "Maybe if I let him rest he stops talking to me." Ruth stepped forward. "And if you don't?" Lila's eyes distant. "Maybe I'll go where Mama went. Maybe it's quiet there." Mist rose thick from the river, swirling around her, pale as bone dust. Mabel shouted, "Lila!" She grabbed her shoulders, but the girl didn't resist. "It don't hurt no more. He can't reach me." A low rumble shook the ground. The river churned, bubbles breaking, water swirling white and red. Mabel yanked her backward, falling in the mud. When they looked up, glow gone, river still, black as before. Only faint white residue lingered. Lila's hand dripped water that gleamed faintly before soaking into the ground. Mabel whispered, "You still here, baby. You still here." Lila's eyes fluttered open. "He quiet now," she whispered. "He gone, softer, but he say thank you." Mabel understood. The girl hadn't freed him out of forgiveness. She freed him because she could carry him no longer. River went still. For the first time, plantation air felt lighter, like something vast exhaled. But Lila's lips were blue, pulse fading. "Hold on, baby," Mabel pleaded. "Hold on." Lila's mouth moved, whispering, "Mama, waiting." Then her body went slack, hands slipping into water, leaving faint white ripples spreading across the surface. The world seemed to stop. River went black again, swallowing the last trace of white. Mabel held her still body, cold settling deep. Ruth trembled nearby. "We got to move her," Ruth said softly. Mabel didn't answer. Eyes locked on the water, faint streaks of milk drifting under moonlight. She whispered, "It took her gentle. At least that much." They wrapped her in a shawl and carried her back through the fields. Grass brushed their legs like hands reaching from the dark. The house on the hill remained a black shape with no light. Dawn bled into the horizon. Others gathered silently, faces pale. Lila lay by the hearth, hair damp and tangled. "She's just sleeping," a young woman whispered. But Mabel shook her head. She'd done more than sleep. Sun rose. The world shifted. Air lightened. Fields, dead and quiet, filled with bird song. River ran clearer. Plantation breathed. but peace has a price. 3 nights later, Ruth woke to soft, slow, barefoot steps. Faint light flickered beyond the window. A child's shadow moved across the yard. She ran to Mabel. "You hear that?" Mabel listened. Steps came again, stopping, turning, and a voice. Low, distant, unmistakable. "Papa, yard empty, air still." Near the fire pit, a small handprint pressed in dirt, faintly white. For days, others swore they saw her, by the river at dusk, on the big house steps, never close enough to touch, always there, small figure in white, face unreadable, eyes too calm for a ghost. Mabel stopped praying aloud. Sometimes she'd rise before dawn, kneel by the river, whisper, "You got your peace, baby." Morning mist rising over water, white and soft, became her answer. The house stayed empty. On still nights, faint piano sounded one slow, broken tune, followed by a child's voice whispering, "I'm still listening." Years passed. Brantham plantation fell to ruin. House sagged, windows broken, roof caved, vines creeping through parlor. Fields untended, soil dry and pale. People still spoke her name, softly by firelight. She wandered between cabins and river, barefoot, white dress glowing. Some swore they saw her kneeling by water, hands pressed to the surface, whispering. Others said she walked the halls of the big house, pausing by piano, waiting for a tune that never came. Older folks called her the listening child, younger ones the quiet girl. The name that stayed was the milk daughter. River still curdled white some mornings, fog low, thick. Standing close, you could hear faint humming, soft, broken melody, grief lingering. Mabel grew old, hands stiff, hair silver, never leaving the land. She tended graves near Magnolia Tree. Every first frost night she walked to river, lit a candle. Not for master, not for wife, but for the girl who carried cruelty like a voice and quieted it. One night, a child followed her. "Miss Mabel, why light that candle?" She said nothing, eyes on water. "'Cause some souls don't rest where they die, they rest where they forgive." Boy frowned. "She forgive him?" Mabel's voice cracked. "She let him go. That's harder." Years passed. Story changed. Names blurred. Truth softened. River kept its color. No one drank. Washed clothes there. Not cursed, just remembered. On certain nights, moon low, air heavy, people claimed to see a woman standing by water, calm, holding something small against her chest. Sometimes she hummed, soft and faint, like a broken melody drifting in the mist, neither happy nor sad. Always there, the way grief lingers after the crying stops. She sometimes looked like the master's wife, sometimes like his daughter, sometimes like a mix of both. She never spoke, though, because the story had already said enough. Time moved, as it always does. It buried some things and left others behind. By the turn of the century, the Brantham name had vanished from county records. The land was divided and sold. The house long collapsed under vines and kudzu. But still no one built there. The fields stayed empty, the soil strangely pale, and people whispered that nothing could grow on land that had known so much shame. The story lived on, but not in books or sermons. It survived in the way people spoke about love and cruelty, as if the two were stitched together from the same torn cloth. They said the master's daughter had been born different, touched by something the world didn't yet have a name for. But what broke her wasn't at her mind. It was the way others chose to see it. Her kindness was taken for weakness, her confusion for defiance. When her mother died, the world taught her one lesson too well. That love in that house always came with pain. What no one expected was how completely she would learn that lesson. She turned it inward until her own heart reflected everything her father was too proud to face. The women in the quarters used to say, "Cruelty leaves a sound behind," like a bell struck too hard, echoing long after the hand that hit it is gone. Some children are born close enough to hear that echo. Some, like Lila, learn to speak in it. But what made her different wasn't that she repeated her father's voice. It was that, in the end, she chose to silence it. Mabel lived long enough to see freedom come, and then the world forget again. She died by the river, sitting in her chair, a candle burned low at her feet. When they found her, she smiled faintly. Her eyes looked toward the water. The morning mist was thick and white. The preacher said her soul went peacefully, but the old women whispered she'd heard the girls humming again, soft and clear, just before her light left her eyes. Years later, a traveler passing through the parish stopped near the ruins of the Brantham house. He said he heard a piano playing faintly through the fog, just 3 slow, uneven notes. When he followed the sound, there was nothing but a broken window and a pale mark on the ground, like a child's handprint. He left before nightfall. No one blamed him, because the people still near that land knew what the rest of the world did not. Sometimes the dead don't haunt. They stay to remind. The story of Lila, the master's daughter, the quiet child who carried his sins to the river and left them there, became more than a ghost tale. It became a warning. Cruelty, when passed down, does not die. It learns, it listens, it waits for someone brave enough to let it go. Some stories don't end in screams, they end in silence. A silence so deep it feels as if the earth itself stops to listen. That's how the Brantham land died. Not in fire or blood, but in quiet. No records remain, no stones with names carved into them. The river swallowed those years whole, leaving only whispers drifting through the cane when the wind moves slow. People say the water still shines faintly, white in the moonlight. If you stand close, your reflection blurs as if the river remembers faces and tries to give them back. Some nights, flowers appear by the bank. No one knows who they're for, the child, the mother, or the man who ruined them both, but they leave them anyway, in case forgiveness needs a place to land. If you listen long enough, you can still hear it. That same thin hum, soft and patient, carrying across the water like a lullaby meant for no one. It shows that the girl's spirit never turned cruel. She didn't linger to punish or frighten. She stayed to remind, to show that even in a world built on cruelty, a small mercy could survive, even if it cost everything. Mercy was what she gave at the end. When she touched the river and let him rest, she freed what had broken her, not from love, but from exhaustion, because hate is heavy, and some hearts refuse to carry it forever. Mabel's descendants kept the story alive long after the house fell. They told it to their children not as a ghost story, but as a lesson about the weight of memory, about what happens when pain is passed down as tradition. They always ended it the same way. When cruelty lives too long in one place, it doesn't vanish. It changes, hides in smaller things, a harsh word, a raised hand, a silence too long. But it can be broken. All it takes is one person willing to stop listening. So when fog rolls over the Brantham fields and the river glows pale under the moon, people still close their windows and whisper, "Let her rest." And the night does. That's what she had been asking all along, not to be remembered for suffering, but for what she ended. The cruelty, the echo, the voice, the silence that followed, wasn't just an ending. It was peace. Some stories fade with time. This one didn't. It stayed, not for what was done, but for what remained. The Brantham plantation is gone. The river runs quiet, but silence remembers, and cruelty finds new names, new homes, new hearts. That's why we tell stories like this. Not to glorify pain, but to remember what it sounds like when someone refuses to pass it on. If you stand by a river and hear something humming through the mist, don't fear. It's not a ghost. It's a reminder that what we forgive, we free, and what we carry carries us back. You've been listening to the Macabre Record. Subscribe and return for another story where history whispers and the past still breathes.